Hi, everybody. Thank Run Plus for New Media for setting this up. Thank you so much, John, for grabbing Greg for us. Yeah, as you said, I'm Rebecca Harrison. I'm an art director at Gallium Studios, and I'll be moderating tonight's chat. This is Greg Lobanov, man of the hour. He's been a long-time indie game developer. He's out in Vancouver, and he's been putting games up on Steam since 2013. And yeah, many of you here probably know him from his hits like Wander Song, and recently he just released Chicory, which is a fantastic game. So you guys should check it out when you have a chance. But yeah, we're just going to be talking today about his process, his hopes, his dreams, and just having a fun time, relaxing. So yeah, all right. There's my introduction.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me, by the way.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure. Yeah. So, well, I guess we can get right into it. And just a reminder to everybody: if you have any questions for Greg, stick them in the little Q&A tab right above the chat, and we'll get to those at the end. So yeah. So Greg, so let's just let us know a little bit about yourself, like what kind of got you started in game dev in the first place, and yeah.
I've always really liked games since I was a little kid. I have always been in the habit of kind of making stuff. So when I was like 4 or 5, I used to draw comics and like make them out of like markers and scissors and paper. And then I used to make board games and card games, and I used to sell like kind of knockoff, like my own game, but it was basically knockoff Yu-Gi-Oh cards like on the playground and stuff. And then at some point, when I was like my early teens, I had like a webcomic I was doing, and I wanted to make a fighting game using characters from that webcomic. And so I did a Google search for like game maker, and I found a piece of software called Game Maker, which I downloaded, and I still use that today. And it turned out that I had a lot of fun doing it, and so much fun that I like totally discontinued the webcomic and just started making video games.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, it feels like it's always yeah. I was doing it for a very, very long time before I even knew that it could be a career thing, and I've been very fortunate that I've always.
Can you guys hear Greg?
Oh, apparently someone can't. Yeah.
Can you hear?
If there's just yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry, I'll let you get back on your.
Just that I've been really fortunate, basically, to get to work on games my whole life and find ways to make it work. So I feel really, really lucky about that. And I try to remind myself too, like that's why I do it, right? Because it's really fun.
Yeah, definitely. That back when I was like 13, I think Game Maker was also my first foray into making games. We had like it was the lamest camp of all time. It was called iCamp. And it was basically for the kids who didn't want to go outside during the summer. And so we would hang out like in the computer lab, and they were like counselors and everything. And they would just be like, here are some tutorials for Game Maker. Have fun. And it was just like, we'll go.
Right.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's a really good piece of software.
It's really, really great. Yeah. And especially at the time, there was a really big community, like online, a forum for stuff. So I mean, I did everything wrong you possibly can, but I would just post in the forums like, why game crash, help? And people would actually help.
Which astounds me. Like, who has the time to be sitting there like, oh, Greg needs help. Better help.
I try to take a lot of time once I understood a bit better. I actually try to take time to be one of those people who would sit on those forums and answer the questions, because I remembered how much it helped me out. But yeah, I mean, it's thankless work, right? Like, millions of problems come and go every day.
Exactly. It's the same question over and over again. Now this is just Stack Overflow. I'm like, all right, which is the green answer? Okay, excellent. Why game object, no move? Oh, static. Okay. Gets me to this day. Honestly, though. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And so then I guess, so you started off doing this as a hobby, but like, what was sort of your impetus, or what made you want to start doing this professionally?
What did make me want to start doing it professionally? Like, I mean, so it was something that I was always doing for fun, because it was just the most fun, cool thing I could ever think of to do. And I think, yes, it's really weird and specific, but I have a very vivid memory of when God of War came out. There was the game actually came with a pack and DVD that was like a making of, And if you watch it today, I feel like there's a lot that is like not great about it. Like it's just a ton of white guys all working in a studio, and it's like no, like it's all about the crunch, right? Like they're like, oh, E3's coming up, everyone's staying up all night, like total
The
suffering,
dream.
toxic work culture, like no one's having a good time. But watching it for some reason when I was like a teenager, I was like, I want to do that. Like I want to work there and live that way and make video games. I didn't know that that's the thing you could do. But for some reason, it was like totally dreamy to me.
There is
so
a certain allure to it. There is a weird allure, especially in teenagers. They're like, I stay up all night anyways. Why? What? I could do that and make games.
Yeah, it was totally like, yeah, party lifestyle. Like, yeah, parents can't tell me to stay up all night and make video games anymore because I'll be an adult. So that was the dream for a little bit. And I went to college thinking like, oh, like, you know, I'll get a job in AAA working on this stuff. And I think it was a really slow process to realizing how much I actually valued the specific way that I have always made games, which is just kind of like making up stuff. And it took, I mean, I spent many years making really bad games that like could not make money. And I'm grateful that I started so early trying that stuff out before I kind of figured out how to do a little bit better than that. But yeah, like I guess like through college and school process, realized that I really just wanted to work independently and keep making my own stuff, and then try to find ways to leverage to make that possible.
And what did you do in? Sorry, I was just saying, what did you do in college? Like, was it like game related or was it a different field?
I went to a school called Drexel University, and my degree was in a field called digital media. So it was kind of their closest approximation to video games, but it was actually including video games and 3D animation and web design. This was like all of those things was just one degree.
That's awesome.
It was, yeah. For actually, interestingly enough, I think it was a really good situation for me because I wanted to go on to do kind of stuff on my own, and so it was actually really nice that I got training in all that stuff because I still use skills from all those fields today. But in the very year after I entered, like the freshman class under me, that degree ceased to exist and actually split it up into more specialized fields, which makes sense because the industry was kind of moving towards like if you want to get a job in the industry, you specialize. But I wasn't specialized, and that actually was good for for what I wanted to do.
The indie way.
Yeah. But that's what I was studying. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Yeah, because oh man, like so my background was in like the sciences at University of Manitoba, and so the jump to indie games for me was like. But I'm always jealous of people who like had like a relevant career path. It's like, oh man. Especially like to have a background in like some form of like programming related stuff. That'd be nice.
Right. That is definitely something that I really try not to take for granted, just how lucky I am that I pretty much have always been going in this one direction. Like I've yet to change. Every time whenever I get to the end stages of a game, I always think like, oh my God, like this might be the last one. Like maybe I should just try doing something different. But then some cool idea always comes along and I'm like, I got to go back in for just one more time.
Instead of becoming like a lumberjack or something.
Yeah.
It's easier on the back.
True.
So I guess, so in your process, like what would you say is sort of the starting point that you over the years have like decided like now this is the beginning of a game? Like where do you begin?
The very, very beginning for me often still is picking something that I really want to learn about. So I think that's when the game started to get, I think that I started to make forward progress. I think in my work was when I started picking projects based on like, I really want to learn color design. What's a game I can use as like a focus for that? I really want to learn like game design, like strict game design, like board game, like super classic game design. What's a game I can do that focuses on that? And each project kind of like has a starting point like that. And then usually like some really weird specific game hook, something that I haven't seen before. And then just a lot like that. That's like the little tiny kernel seed at the heart of it. And then a lot of stuff just kind of built on it. Like, you know, it kind of grows outward from that little seedling.
Looking at your game like library on Steam, like you can definitely see the point at which you started to like really like do that effectively. Like,
yeah.
Because like I'd say like Wandersong definitely like because for those who haven't played the game, the whole thing is built around this sort of color wheel of music, where it's like your joystick, you point it in a direction, and the bard will sing. The main character will sing that note that corresponds to it, and you can just play with that thing without the rest of the game there. It's just like
yeah, and that's exactly where that game started. It was just like a rainbow wheel, like a musical instrument with no screen, no character, nothing, just and a controller that makes music. And it was just like I was trying to see if I can make a musical instrument out of it. But like for context, game like the very first commercial game that I did on my own was a JRPG, and it was a 10-hour like Earthbound inspired thing. And it was, I mean, it's like in some ways it's kind of cool, but it also was just super unfocused and muddy and like not exceptional in any particular way, and like just a super huge multi-year project with no commercial viability or anything. I think that's a really common thing that a lot of people do, especially when it's your very first project, your first game project. There's always that sense that it's like, oh, this is like, this represents my entire life, right? It's like my first album, so everything I've ever loved, every skill I have has to be represented here, and this has to be like the best thing I can imagine. So you like put way too much time into it, and you make it super huge without even thinking about like how it's going to make money or whatever, right? And I totally did that. I released that game, and no one cared about it, and that's when I after that went into hiding and started thinking about, okay, I have to actually learn how to do a good version of that.
Because you have so many ideas, and you're just like stick them all together. But that's a first project. It's totally unrefined. It's a ball of everything you've ever had in your mind, and you get that out.
Pure enthusiasm.
And then you're like, okay, all right. Now that that's out of the way, now that my 5-year MMORPG base building pet collector is done, I can start making things.
Yeah, that is basically how it felt. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I've always enjoyed game jams. That's where I got my start in the industry, was by making like game jam games, just because like the small time frame of just like 72 hours really forces you to like pick like one mechanic, one idea, and then explore that. And then if it's good, you can take it from there. But yeah, definitely the pit of the first project is real. The perfectionism sets in.
Yeah. It's super true. I've actually found personally that I really don't like game jams.
Really?
Which is something that makes me different from other people. Like I really like to spend time on games, and so it was even to spend just a couple months on a project like some of the ones that I did after that RPG. It was like that was a challenge for me to spend only 2 months on something. But that like learning how to do that was really useful for me. But yeah, I always find that I mean, maybe this might be a me thing, but I just always struggle because after 3 days on a project, I'm never happy with it. It's like I could, I always know like what could be better, and I really struggle with just like letting go at that point if I think the idea, has value to it.
Yeah.
And so and also just the going nuts for 3 days part of it, where you're trying to get it done in that span, is also like tough for me. Yeah. I think I'm just slow, and like I just live on like a month-long cycle instead of a weekend-long cycle, like some people seem to.
which is probably why you have commercial games. Maybe. In the end, it's like I don't know. There's probably a sweet spot in there somewhere. It's like the weekend is too little. The 16 years is too much. You just got
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, definitely the capacity to finish a game, start to finish, is like that is a learned skill. That is a serious skill.
That is a skill. Absolutely a skill. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, and then like once you're done with the game, it's like people play it, and that's terrifying.
A whole other different problem.
Yeah. Do you still get stressed when people play your games?
I do actually, but more because I can never, because I've seen every broken version of it before it comes out. So when I think about being scared of it, I mostly think about like I know everywhere I've ever seen the game crash, and I'm always just worried that's going to happen, because I have released tons of buggy games before too, like really badly buggy games that crash. You get to the end of the game, and right before the ending cutscene, like it closes down, deletes your save data, kind of stuff. I've done all of it, like. So I can't let go of like that like trauma of like having made that mistake, and I'm always worried about that now. And somehow I always make the same mistakes again too.
Well, it's always like some late night you're like, Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's like,
And
oh, you know,
so
like,
we're in the
oh,
flow.
there's that one problem. I'll just change this one thing really quick. I won't check it, and it's fine. I know I've been doing this for 20 years, and I know that this is gonna work. And it never works. Always makes a new bug, and somehow I trick myself every
Every
time. Like,
time. Every
yeah,
time. Oh man.
yeah.
uh yeah, so I just recently went through a game launch.
Mm.
And we launched with the game breaking bug, so it's just like, and our programmer was camping and it was, oh no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's just like
It's always like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it never gets much better.
That part of it, no. But
uh,
I definitely feel a lot more. I at least on the other hand, I do feel a lot more confident in my ability to make something that people will like, or at least to know what people kind of like about it. Like I've made games that people like a lot, and games that people don't like so much, and I've made games in lots of different genres.
mhm.
And I mean this yeah. I mean maybe I'll release some game someday and prove myself wrong, but it feels right now like this is a skill that I built up, is the ability to like kind of foresee what people will like about a game and what's going to work about it, and like when people don't like the game, what they won't like about it. Like I can kind of understand that now, and that's
Mhm.
useful for making that those aspects of the scary kind of go away a little bit, right? Because I'm, when someone doesn't like it, I'm like, well, okay, they were looking for this and I didn't put that in, and that's
Yeah. So
that's
when you're
cool.
coming up with like a new idea, do you like show it to people and workshop it, or is it all just happen up here?
A lot of it happens in my head, or yeah, like and when something's in the really 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 early phase, where I'm trying to figure out if something is good or not. Like I think there's a really really long process, of just trying to figure out how to put that concept into words, that has to happen before I can even show it to somebody. So
Hmm.
I'll spend a lot of time kind of moving pieces around in my head and just kind of like looking at a wall and trying to think about stuff, and yeah, like putting together prototypes, like little game things that are really ugly, but just to kind of try some little piece of a thing. um, but especially once I have something that I'm confident in, I guess usually when I start bringing other people into it for that showing part, it's not to see if the game is good. It's more like I have an idea is really exciting. Uh, Now, like when I show this thing to you, do you get this, or what can I change about this to make it so that you
Interesting.
understand this thing that I know is cool? Like this is great.
We should get you in the same place as me, and then
Yeah,
we
I
could
tend to get you where I am. Yeah, basically.
That's awesome. That's really cool, actually. And in the
Hmm.
meantime, you're just like sitting on the bus, just like
Yeah, a lot of
staring
that.
straight into the person across from you, and you don't see them. They're like,
Yeah, I actually work really visually, so I like to do a lot of sketches or kind of like storyboarding kind of thing. Where I'm trying to visualize how or imagine how some part of the game is going to work, I'll draw kind of like thumbnail ideas for like screen layouts and things like that. I'm really inspired by things like UI, even. So like thinking about like what a menu is going to look like is actually really exciting to me, and sometimes helps me kind of like put shape to like a game concept that I don't really know how to place yet. Like Wandersong is a good example where like yeah, the very first thing that existed for the game was just the rainbow circle, which is like a UI element, right? But there was no character or story. It was just like a circle on a screen that like you did inputs and it made sounds, and that was like enough for me, a starting point to see what the rest of that game was going to be.
That's
But yeah,
awesome.
I think about that stuff a lot.
Yeah. It's my, as I was saying to you before all this, I work for the guy who made like The Sims and Spore, and he's on some other level. He's like the world's oldest 6-year-old is his shtick. Like there's no end to like the crazy ideas he comes up with. But his like design mantra is make it a toy, not a
Mm.
game. And if it's fun as a toy, you can make it into a game. Otherwise, you shouldn't even start. Also, I'm sorry I'm all fuzzy. I'm fuzzy.
I like that philosophy a lot. I think that's a really cool way to approach it, to
Yeah.
make something that's really fun.
Yeah, and I think you definitely struck that with Wandersong, and even with Chicory, like just the like because you see people like I was watching a Let's Play of it just because I haven't had a chance to actually pick up the game. Sorry,
Mm.
but there was one point there was two people playing together. It was a two-player mode. I think they were like in a relationship together, and they were just talking while on a screen of the game, and they were just drawing. They're like one of them would draw in a character, the other one would like draw it in another color, and they would kind of like like. So it was just like yeah, it was, even without the story, they were having fun discussing like the perils of a creative lifestyle.
Yeah. I was really happy with how things worked out in Chicory with that stuff. And to me, it's like almost funny. I don't know. It felt weird. The deeper I got into that game, the weirder I felt that nothing like it I hadn't seen something like it before, where a user just basically gets like an MS Paint, and that's like their main input for the game. There's a lot of games that have drawing in them, but for games where you just are drawing all the time and that's what you do to interact with stuff, I hadn't seen a game like that, and it worked so well. Like it's like it makes my job so easy as a designer because like I don't even have to give you. I could give you like an empty screen with nothing to do, and people will have fun with it, because drawing is just really fun. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if it's anybody who plays it, they're like, oh, this drawing, it's just so distracting from like, the Zelda-like gameplay that I wanted to get to.
That is actually like a huge, there's a really, really huge variance in how people approach that game, which I find really interesting. And some people, like, they don't care about the drawing at all. They're there for a Zelda game and for the plot. And so they go from point to point B, they barely draw, they beat the whole game in like, 8 hours or 7 hours or something. And they just like, solve every puzzle, beat the game, and they're happy. That's the cool thing is that they do all that and they're happy. They think that's a cool Zelda game. Other people like only draw. They like get lost like coloring in flowers and clouds and trees and stuff. And some character will come along and be like, "There's a huge problem in the next town over. Like, please come help us." And they're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'll get right on that." And then they like go back to drawing on the flowers and stuff. And then they're like, "Oh, like, something really important was going on." And like, I don't remember what it was, but whatever. And they also have a really good time too. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so funny how there's just so many different kinds of people out there. It's just like,
yeah.
You can't design for everybody.
No, usually you can, but if I'm proud of anything with Chicory, I think it's that how successful it did seem to be at getting like a lot of different kinds of interests from people and in one experience, like weirdly, but I think
that's super cool.
Yeah, I think it is owing to just the drawing tool being like great. I mean, that's just like a free game inside my game.
The mini game is the game.
Yeah.
Alrighty, I had so many questions. Here's a fun one. So, how would you compare like how you did like making Chicory to how you were making Wandersong? Like, what have you learned between those, and what are you learning in Chicory that you're going to bring to your next project?
I think so. Wandersong, when I made it, was definitely like my most successful project, and like a lot of axes, like financially and also I think artistically. Like I was really, really proud of it, and I didn't really feel like I could do a better version of what Wandersong was. So Chicory was like kind of a reaction to that, and that I think I really just tried to change directions really dramatically, or tried to think about so like where Wandersong, the focus was very, very strictly on storytelling. It was a game where I think one part of the premise of that game was that I was going to be willing to make sacrifices in any aspect of the game if it made the story better. That was kind of like one of the highest level things for that game. And I'm happy with the result of that. Like I think it does work really well as a story. But then the biggest criticism that game would get is that people would be like, "Oh, well, like this part is really frustrating," or I really wish this mechanic was used more, or like whatever, that kind of stuff. And like when I was working on the game, I knew that stuff was a problem, but chose to make it's like this part's gonna be really frustrating because the character's really frustrated and whatever.
I thought it was good. I like that. Yeah. I could tell when you were making it, like some parts you're like, this is definitely in line with the way he's feeling right now, and I am in tune. This sucks.
So for Chicory, I guess the challenge was then like how much now can I like if I make a really consistent like interesting game structure, like in a really classic game style, like let's say Zelda. If I make a game like that, like how much of the Wandersong story flavor can I mix in without sacrificing like the gameplay always being consistent, basically. Like every part is fun, the mechanics all repeat and interact with each other, like that stuff that people who really are into games usually like, How much of that can I like, without sacrificing that part, how much story can I use, basically, going the other way?
Interesting.
Yeah. It was
for the next project, where did the pendulum swing lie?
The next project is like, it's I know what the next project is, and I can't really talk about it, and I don't even know like on this axis. I think I'm not sure yet.
Fair enough.
I'm still figuring it out. Yeah. I think it's going to definitely have a mix of story and game mechanic stuff, but I'm in the early phases of even figuring out how those things are going to mix.
Mhm.
But I am really excited about that, like
That's very fuzzy.
that place where those things overlap, basically like solving that problem where those things talk to each
Mhm.
other. I think is really fun. That's a fun space for me to work in. So I'm working in that space again,
That's
but
so
it's
exciting.
really different. It's a really different game. I can say that.
Okay, so we've had song, we've had color, and the next one is going to be smell.
You will never guess.
Okay, I'm excited. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Also, I'm changing colors. This is exciting. I was green, then I was pink. Now I'm pale again. Excellent. That's really cool, actually. Let's see, what other questions did I have? I've been watching like interviews from the last little while. Also, I got to say, great outfit at the full indie summit back in like 2018. You had short hair then and like the cool jacket.
Yeah, my talk jacket.
Yeah, that's hilarious, actually. Yeah, so there was one talk you did. I can't remember. Maybe it was like an article or something, but I remember reading it back when Wandersong was just like maybe a year old or something like that. And it was talking about how you kind of empathized with the character of the bard because they were explicitly not the hero. Like they were not the hero. And you live in Vancouver surrounded by all these incredible indie developers who are like crazy mega hits. It's like, and I'm not saying that you're not, but like you kind of are in that little like sort of big fish zone. And it's like and like I guess sort of how true is it that you kind of feel that way or not?
I totally, I mean, I think that's just a defining aspect of my personality. I mean, there's no relationship, I think, between how I feel about myself and like the facts of my life, you know? That's just like that's just the way that I think I have to see myself to live for some reason. So yeah, but it is an aspect of my personality is like, I totally see myself as like, not the best at what I do. I mean, I also think there is like truth to that. Like, I really do feel like a lot of people around me are a lot better than me at what I do, but I get by on like charm and charisma, and that's okay. That's just what I do. But yeah, like my relationship with all that stuff is pretty complicated.
Yeah, it's tough out there because there's definitely so many people who've been in this industry for so long. And like in my work, I used to work with this guy named Chuck Eeler, and he worked at like Atari and then at EA and all that stuff. And he'd come up with these concepts, and they were just so like they were so unique. I'm like, what were you on when you drew this? And it's like it almost makes your work feel like simple. You know what I mean? And so it's like I think that's also why Wandersong really struck me powerfully because it's like here's someone who loves what they do, but kind of struggles with that aspect of being creative,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Charm's the way to be.
Yeah, I solve like I find problems and I solve them like my little way that I can basically, and hope that's good enough. Yeah.
Right back there I am. I'm on fuzzy again. Yeah. It's a tough world, that game dev life. Oh man. So I can see in the chat. I recognize most of these names, but for anybody out there who's sort of more in the aspirational level of making games, in one of your interviews, you said something very interesting. You said doors open one at a time when talking about opportunities and how you need to approach each level. Like, don't look at like where someone is up here. Just be like, what is my next? What is the next step on my journey? And it might be like step one. So, what would your advice be to like newbies?
To absolute newbies, I think my advice would be to definitely try to find your peers. I think what a lot of people, I always get a lot of messages from people who are starting out who like want to learn from me or work with me, but and I know a lot of people like who are kind of at my level, they get messages like that, but it's actually really hard for someone like me to really tell you like what you need to learn or even how to be successful from where you are, because the world that I came up in when I was making my first games was utterly different from what it is right now if you're starting out. But like where my success came from was from working with peers, basically, like finding people who are at my level, trying to make games that, you know, were from coming from where I was, and trying to find what the opportunities were for us, and working together on stuff, right? Who are at the same skill level. Because those people who are like at your level right now are someday going to be the really famous people who are way cooler than me. So like, like, yeah, but it always starts at the bottom, right? There's no like shortcut to like just like get the famous advice that makes you successful. And yeah, I mean, something that was really helpful for me was something I touched on a little bit earlier, but was on, you know, starting projects with a focus on trying to learn something. I think was a really helpful focus for me, because I went from trying to like encapsulate my entire like soul and life in each project, and I started thinking more about like, okay, how can I better my skills in this field, which is like literally like a, you know, trillion different skills that you can be better at. Like, how can I just pick something to get better at least one skill, you know, by the end of this project, be better at this one thing that I actually be better at, so that when I start the next one, I have, you know, 2 skills.
Yeah. That's like the indie almost like requirement. It's like, you got to be a unicorn. And like good at, you gotta be able to like compose and do art and program.
But no one starts as a unicorn, right? I think that's the thing that I didn't realize at first, is I was trying to be a unicorn when I was just a rat, and I had to learn how to grow like a beautiful horse mane first, and then the horn, and then the hooves, and then, you know.
It's just an awkward half rat, half unicorn.
Yeah, still a rat, but I've got all these really nice parts now.
Oh, high school. No. Oh man, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's like you can't set out like being like, my goal is to make like $1 million as a game dev on like my first release, because then it's like, just take your expectations and just way down. Raticorn, Unirat, king of the rats, the biggest rat. But yeah, it's just, oh man, yeah, my first game was not good, but luckily it's lost to time, so it's good.
That's how I feel about my first 10 games, so yes.
But that's the thing that people don't see, is they see someone who is a professional and they go, oh, like I'm in high school, like, you know, like what is between here and here that I need to do? And it's not like it's like how people like what's the magic formula, you know? Like there's no magic formula. There is no brush that'll make you a better artist, you know? Right. It's just failing several times and then
failing upwards. Yeah.
Yeah. But I like what you said about picking something to learn from each project, because that way you're not coming at it from like a success fail perspective. You're like, as long as I have learned something, I have succeeded. Whether I make $0 or a bajillion dollars off of it, like it doesn't matter, you know?
Yeah, I think that it helped my outlook with that stuff as well, right? Because my expectations were always really low when I was thinking about it that way.
Yeah. And it's like, and one thing that kind of irks me about, like, I guess the speech about making games right now, especially to young people, like my brother works, he works at a place called Code Ninja, which is basically like a little, it's like an after-school program for nerds, where like they'll teach you how to code and you'll make like games in Roblox. And he's always talking about how like the rhetoric on these Roblox sites is like, make big money making games. Like, these kids are 11 years old. It's like, and it's like on TikTok, it's like, it's not about making fun videos. It's like, how can you monetize your personality and brand? It's like so serious. Yeah. Just like have fun for once in your life, and you might actually get better at what you want to do.
Having fun has been a really, really huge focus for me through my projects. And that's actually something that has always been like a critical, like one of those like unbreakable pillars that I try to keep a part of every project, is like, make sure this is fun to work on. And as soon as as soon as the project gets into territory that's not fun to do, like that's usually a sign to me that I should turn somewhere else. You know, like don't do this level. It's not fun to make. Like,
yeah, it won't be fun to play.
Yeah, it won't be fun to play. Don't code that thing. Like, don't animate that. Yeah, whatever. Right? Like, yeah.
It has to spark joy.
Spark joy. Yeah.
Yeah, I like Daniel H says high school, more like post grad, and still don't know how to get from here to there. And that's the thing. It's like I became a dental hygienist out of college, and then
Well,
I just enjoyed making games and making comics and all that stuff, and then eventually like I just sort of like backflipped quietly into making films.
huh.
But it's like there's no path to it, you
No.
know.
Yeah.
So it's like, you gotta do what makes you happy. Oh man. Alrighty. What other questions do I have? Oh, here was one. So what are the differences? Oh, Q&A. Sorry, I forgot about the Q&A. We'll do Q&A.
Sure.
Forget about my lame question. It was lame anyways. All right, let's see. Let's start with this one. I'm struggling a little with the syntax, but what made you guys say yes? Chicory is the game concept to work on out of all the other ones.
That's a good question. I guess at the outset for that game, there wasn't like a the way that I do this stuff. Like this is I started that project when Wandersong was finished but not out yet, and I was starting to think about what I wanted to do next. And the idea that I was like interested in was a game where you can draw on anything, or like drawing is the main interaction. But I had no concept of what that game was going to look like or how I was going to play. It was just like that premise. And I was trying a lot of prototypes just to see if the idea could work, not knowing if it was going to work. And it took a lot of tries to get to what would be Chicory, like finding that top-down camera angle and exploration-focused stuff. But as soon as I had that thing where it was like an exploration game with drawing on it, that I was like, this is really cool, and this actually hits everything I want. Where I get to draw all the time, and drawing is really fun. Like this is really fun to play. I can imagine lots of puzzles that could work with this.
Yeah.
So it really was like. Yeah, it's weird because in one sense it's like there was only one idea that I was working on, but it never was going to be the project until I found that prototype that made me, like that proved that it was actually good. Because I think, if like a couple months after that, if I still hadn't found that thing, I probably would have dropped off on it. I would have said, okay, I guess it's not possible, right? I'll do something else. But because I found that version of that idea that worked, that's why I wanted to go for it on it, because I really, really liked that prototype.
And it turned out awesome. So.
Thanks.
And here's another question. So after graduating post-secondary, did you like immediately become a full-time indie, or did you like part-time a job, part-time indie? What was your situation?
So I didn't finish graduate school. I did an undergraduate degree. And I actually was publishing commercial games while I was in college, which was messed up. Like from a work-life balance perspective, like I was not sleeping enough every night. And yeah. But I was publishing indie games at the time, and actually part of my transition into like a professional full-time happened when, as part of my school curriculum, you're expected to do an internship. Like there's a thing, like a period of 6 months where you leave school and you do an internship at some studio. And where I was in Philadelphia, there were very, very few game studios. So if I wanted to get a job in games, it was really tough. I did apply for some, but it was super competitive, and like even the jobs that were available, like they weren't the most exciting. And so something that I talked to my advisor about and ended up getting to do was an internship where I just worked as an indie game developer. And they had not done something like that before, but I was like, I had like a game that I'd been working on. I was like, hey, like if you give me 3 months, like I'll go full time on this game. I'll publish it. I'll tell you about my sales numbers and stuff. Like I will make, may not make a lot of money, but I'll make some money. Even some of my peers weren't making money, right? Like they literally were just interns, doing unpaid labor stuff, right? So I was like, hey, like this will be real world experience. I'll launch a game and stuff. Will you let me do that? And they said yes, which was kind of crazy. But that was like I spent those 3 months as a full time game developer.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which was really like it was actually really, really useful like practice for me, basically. like going back to school. But yeah, once I came out of school, like I had been publishing games, and I published another game that I'd been working on. Like just after I graduated, I published a finished project. And that one at the time was my most successful game, like to date. And it was not like a huge runaway, but it was enough. I was paying rent.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Which one was that?
That game was Coin Crypt. That's the game I released like just when I had graduated from college. And it was So okay, it actually was the world's very first deck building roguelike game.
Ah.
But I don't really, I don't think I can take credit for inventing the genre because I don't think a lot of people made better ones after that, and I don't think they played my game or anything. But it just so happens that I made the first one, and I've been
And that's
working on
forever
that.
on your shelf. Just...
Yeah. So I've been working on that as an early access game while I was in school, and so like it had some income from that and stuff, and also like yeah, like it happened that I had like other games that I submitted for awards and awards that like had ended up giving like money for winning stuff. So that's
Wow.
like I just had money coming in from stuff like that, and
Nice.
what's it called, freelance projects. I was like freelancing on some games, so yeah, basically when I graduated from school, it was like one less responsibility, and I was finally like, okay, now I'm just gonna do the game stuff. And yeah, it was really tough
Okay.
to be clear, but yeah, it was like it was almost like a transition from school into professional stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's a pretty sweet, like, streamlined. Well, I mean,
Yeah,
obviously it wasn't easy,
yeah,
but
compared to most people, there was not a lot of wavering, right? I was always like it was always right there, right? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, and so here's a good question. So I'm going to adapt this question a little bit. I hope you don't mind, Amir. So I was reading your Wikipedia's. So on Wander Song, I believe you worked with one other person who was helping with the composition of some songs,
I
or were
worked
you working
with
with?
I worked with a composer and also a sound designer. So two people
Okay,
who worked
okay.
on audio. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, and then but for Chicory, you had definitely a bigger team at your disposal, and
Yeah.
like create your composer worked on Deltarune, I saw.
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
That to
Yeah.
me is that forget everything else. That's my pinnacle of success. If I ever like get into the same room as Toby Fox, I'll just be like, I'm retired now. That's it.
Well, I don't think she's ever been in the same room as Toby Fox, but she's been in the same email chain as Toby Fox. So that's
That's
something.
enough for me. That's enough for me. Just his email signature. Oh.
Yeah.
Fangirling her. But so my question is, which do you prefer? Like working in a really small group or in a larger group?
I know people who've worked in larger teams like 10 plus people, 20 plus, 50 plus, and
Mm-hmm.
I think every size of team has a really different feeling. There's always the temptation, like, because I've thought about, oh, like, what could I do if I had more people working with me? But I also know from talk, I've never, the biggest team I've ever worked on, I think, was the one with Chicory. It was 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
And I know enough from talking to other people to know that I think this is just about my sweet spot. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what I really like about making games is I really love the process. I really love being involved in it, like thinking through the design problems. I really actually like animating. I like programming. I like writing. Like all the pieces of it that happen, I like to do. And the more people you have, the more your role starts to shift towards communicating with other people. Like
Mm-hmm.
even if you're an artist working on a bigger team of artists, like you're doing less of the art and you're thinking more about how your work is going to line up with other people's, right? But I really like the small team thing where everybody is wearing lots of hats.
Mm-hmm.
So my trajectory has kind of been this like steady, this very tiptoe of like I really like this part of the game and how many more people can I bring in without losing that part
Mm-hmm.
that I like.
Yeah.
So I think the size that I'm at right now, which is around 5 people, is close to my sweet spot, and I would be interested like it's that thing where I know if I bring in even one more person than 5, then you also need a producer, and then you
Yeah.
also
And it's a whole thing.
and then yeah. So I personally found that I really like working at the scale that I'm at right now, but it's tenuous, and I know there's a lot of things that I can't do by working at this size, but I'm yeah I'm
Seems to
learning
be
to be
working
happy with
pretty
that.
well. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
unless you want to start getting into like the online games world, you probably get it with 5 people.
yes, yeah.
Yeah. As far as niches go, I'd say yours is like it's like the nicest like echelon of indie gaming is like the RPG zone, you know?
Right. And it is also nice when you're working with a few number of people that you don't have to sell that many copies. That's always been been a huge benefit for me compared to like people I've talked to, is that like my teams are really small, especially when I was working like just being one other person. Like I don't, selling 1,000 copies of a game when it's only you working on it, that's a year of rent. Like that, like that can be it, right?
Yeah.
So
that's
yeah.
Yeah, it's deceptively difficult to sell indie games.
It is, yeah. So it matters. It always matters.
Yeah, the notion of like, if it's good, people will play it. It's like, no.
That's not true. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
Sadly. Maybe once, but um all right, what other questions have we got? Here's one. What's personally your favorite game you've made and why?
I really, well, it's like asking which of my children's my favorite. I'm proud of all my games for different reasons. Some of the older ones are definitely products of like a person who had less skills than I do, I guess. So I can recognize that like they're not as good. I think between my last couple of games, like Chicory and Wandersong, I feel really confident about both of them. Like I would have a really hard time telling you that I like one more than the other, but I do think they're really, really different, and I'm proud of them for really different reasons. I guess that's not really an answer, but I feel like Chicory, like that's my last project, and I'm definitely proud of how it showcases my skills as a game designer specifically, and like the marriage of game design and storytelling. Like I think I'm proud of the work I did kind of in both those fields. Where I feel like Wandersong, like I willingly sacrificed. I was willing to make a game that was a bit worse, to make a story that was better. I'm really proud of how Chicory, I think, sort of is a more well-rounded like thing, and I'm happy with that. So I guess I'm proud of that right now. You know.
Yeah, you're proud of like the growth process that you've gone through, almost.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Matt Welk asks, which of your games should get a movie adaptation first?
If I like, honestly, I think Wandersong would be a really, really great film. I mean, I think Chicory would be really cool too. But yeah, I think something about Wandersong, because because it was already made and like with such a linear story in mind, I just feel like I can really see the adaptation for that more clearly. Where for Chicory, I feel like you would have to adapt a lot more basically to make something out of that into like a film. But Wandersong was like the premise of that game was like, how do I want to make like an animated featured video game feeling thing, right? So that's where that came from. Yeah.
It comes through. It definitely comes through. It just gives me flashbacks to like there's one part where the bard is at like a concert with Miriam, and they're just like dancing for like a minute. They're just dancing, and you're just sitting there like, oh yeah, this is theatrical. Here we go. I'm having emotions. This is working. So we also got a couple of questions about your testing process. I guess perhaps later on when you're into the meat of things, and like how structured is your process, and like what kind of people do you go to?
So my process for that changed a lot actually on Chicory versus games prior. And I have to say that I'm not the best in the world at this because like I mentioned, I've always launched games that are super buggy. With games like up until Chicory, I was always basically just sending it to friends, reminding friends to play it, second reminding them to play it, and then third reminding them to play it, to please play this game. It's coming out next week. Please play the game. I really need to know if there's any bugs in it.
Please.
Watching people play for sure. Yeah. Well, there's different kinds of like you do different kinds of play testing to look for different kinds of problems. Like there's bug testing. I don't know exactly what they're asking about, but like there's looking for bugs, which I've always struggled with because that's been really hard to do when you're basically relying on friends for that stuff. But as far as kind of like the playtesting, like for quality, or like for like that, the kind of subjective, like, is this game good enough, like does this work, that's sort of a harder, more subjective problem to do with testing. Like there's like some kind of like basic key points that I guess like I always come back to with that stuff. Like you get people to play, you watch for how they feel about stuff, and you ask them not for what they think you should change, but for what they think are problems. So like questions I always like to ask people are like, what was your favorite part of this game, and what was your least favorite part of this game? And like because a lot of people when they're playtesting a game, like the kind of suggestions they'll give you will be like, oh, I really think like this gap should have been smaller, or the character should move faster, or that kind of thing. Like this kind of specific thing that's usually not that helpful. But when you ask them like, well, why do you think that?
It's like a symptom.
Yeah, the symptoms, right? And understanding the symptoms is usually a much better way to kind of finding like the best solution to act, because you understand the game better than they do. That's like a super classic answer that you've probably heard before, but that's like
Hey,
with that
it's
quality
classic
stuff.
for a reason.
Yeah. That's kind of, yeah, like that's obviously standard in my approach to that stuff. But with Chicory for bug testing or QA, quality assurance, we actually worked with a publisher, Finji, who helped us with QA. They actually had two full-time QA testers who like played through the game a lot. And it's incredible to me how much that like I'd never worked with QA testers before, but it's crazy how much better the game was because of people doing that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I'm really grateful for that too, especially in a game like Chicory, which allows the player a lot of freedom. There were just a lot of weird corners interactions that I never would have found without like that kind of really intense testing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's how we did it with Chicory. Just people seriously just like spent, you know, like weeks playing the game like over and over again. Like yeah, which is like I just can't believe they did that. Although notably, one of our QA testers for Chicory became a really big fan of the game and actually went on to speedrun it after it came out. Because he had such a good understanding of all the ins and outs and how to get through stuff really fast, and he, even after playing it for that many hundreds of hours, was still really into it. So
that's awesome.
It's kind of cool. Yeah.
I always feel like QA would be like the biggest tease. It's like, yeah, I play video games for a living.
Yeah, usually it's not. Usually you don't come out like really enjoying the game. You usually come out being really sick of it. So I thought it was really special that person really enjoyed it that much. But yeah,
it's so sweet actually. And I think that leads us into what I think should be our last question, because the only other unanswered ones are kind of repeats of things you've already talked about. But so what was it like working with a big publisher like Finji?
It was really cool. I mean, so with Wandersong, the game previously, I worked with Humble, and they're a publisher as well. And like, in a sense, I would say like Humble is actually a bigger publisher than Finji in terms of like the number of games, like their size, their portfolio, the number of games they're working with at a given time, the size of their team. Finji, by comparison, is actually really small. And I my experience working with them was actually really different because I felt like Finji is such a small team that I had a way more kind of personal touch with it. Like I was always talking to the same person who basically like sends the emails to all the platforms was also the person who was like in meetings with me, telling me about stuff, was also the person who was like looking at the financials and deciding like what, you know, how much budget we had to work for X amount of time and whatever. And that was just really nice because, just like how I like working with a small team on the games, it was really nice working with a publisher who I also really felt like had a very kind of personal focus on my project and our needs, and was in touch with like a lot of, was basically wearing a lot of hats, but just on the publishing side, where when I was working with Humble, sometimes decisions just would come to me and you wouldn't always know why. They'd say, oh, financial says that, we spend this much on this thing, or we have this much time to do this, or we make a trailer for this event or whatever. And it's like, oh, like, why? And it's like, oh, well, I don't know, like, the board just said that or whatever, right? Like that kind of thing happens all the time. And it makes sense. It makes sense because there's so many people making decisions for so many reasons. But it was a really different experience working with them versus Finji. On the flip side though, like the number of resources is really different. So like with Finji, like sometimes you need something on an emergency and like they just don't have like manpower, right? So it's like somebody like ends up like staying up super late to get this thing done because platform said we need this trailer done by tomorrow, and that sucks. But that kind of thing can happen, right? Like, and sometimes they don't move as fast or don't have access to the same kind of things as quickly. Where with Humble, it's like I always knew that it's almost like automatic, right? There's like this like giant machine that just like processes requests from all these platforms, and accounting is just like super automatic thing that just happens for them, right? So there's pros and cons each one for sure.
Exactly,
working with publishers, so I wouldn't even say one's necessarily better. It really depends what you want. Like the relationship with Finji worked really well for me, but depending on the kind of project you're doing, like it might not be always what you need, right?
Absolutely.